Okay, good morning. So we're up to Siman Kuf Samach Halacha Dalet. So we're talking about what water is valid for Netilas Yadayim. So the Mechaber says, Mayim sheshosu mehem hatar negolim. If chickens drank from the water, oishe lokak, pirush siyas hakelev nikra lekika, they sort of lapped up, they licked the water, mehem hakelev, dogs lapped up the water, yesh misha paisel, there are those who puzzle, ve'ein devarov nirin. But those words don't appear. But whether dogs or tarnagolim or any other animal lapped up the water, yesh lahachshi, you can use that water for Netilas Yadayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkot in Chof, tarnagolim oishe lokak, lefiyam avur beis Yosef, lav dafka elu, elahu adin b'chol behem v'chayav v'oif chutz miyona. Any animal apart from a yona. Yesh misha poisel the medaminon lemayim shel paras chatas. Now, what's the problem? Why is it if an animal licks the water, drinks the water, it's possible? Because we learn it from the water from the chatas. B'shtias behema chay v'oif, that puzzles it. V'yesh mefarshim shom hatam, and why takat is it puzzle it? Because mishum melacha, because it's for the mei chatas you can't have water that's been worked on. And therefore, this is considered some degree of work when the animals drink from it. When the animals sort of pull their head out of the trough, the water drips back into it. And it's as if work has been done with this water. That it's been sort of served the drinking. And then it mixes up with the others, and therefore it passes everything. And so too with Netilas Yadayim, any form of work, like we said previously, will passel that water. However, ve'ein dvarav nirin. Why? The dafka b'paras chatas instead of melacha kol. Because with mei chatas, that's when work passels that water. For gam dekol rishonim sivu lechoshev melacha gam b'paras chatas, and also other rishonim learn that work for paras chatas doesn't is not called work, just drinking from the water. Or and other reasons are given why mei chatas is possible, which are not relevant to here. Or milvad zeh le'inin Netilas Yadayim lo nifsar yedei zeh kol hamayim. And it's only that water which has been drunk, and therefore if it's mixed up with other water, there's a concept of bittul over here, and that would validate it. Okay, Elabain, so he says whatever type of animal drinks from it, yesh lahachshir, you can use water for Netilas Yadayim from like a trough or something, a bucket that an animal has drunk from. The Achronim sort of they're split on this. The Ibatan Negolim, and they say as follows: the Ibatan Negolim v'chein b'shachayis v'eifos kashem k'das hamachab v'chanal. When it comes to chickens and chayas and eifos and things like that, they were matir. Aval b'shtias kelev v'chazir pasum mishum mos, because if it's a dog or a chazir, then that's already considered mos, and you're not going to use that for Netilas Yadayim. The mos mamayim mishtir v'nasu k'sheshevchin. V'chayodim kosov the b'shas atchag yesh lismech adas hamachaber lahatze af be'elu. If you're stuck and there's nothing else, then you can be matir even that. Im shosel mehem nochosh, if a snake drank from the water, ein noitlim mehem Yadayim, you shouldn't use that water. Or mayim shenizgalu ba'alma. This is very interesting. Mayim shenizgalu. Sometimes you come to a sink and the water's already there, and maybe it's been there for an hour or two. You're allowed to use that keli with that water for Netilas Yadayim. Ma'im sheniskalu. He says, "Ein choshin ha'idna l'shem meshosim mehen nochash." Now, the whole problem of ma'im megulim is that back in the days, the nochash could come to it, and therefore he says, for Netilas Yadayim purposes, we're not choshish for this today. The ina mitzuyim, because it's not motzor to have nechoshim drinking from these things. For af misha nizav zelishtir. Now, there are those who are careful for drinking for something which is megula. I mean, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is very makbid on that, and I'm also Rabbi Chaim from the old city, Reb Nevinsal. Reb Nevinsal, I went there for not long ago. He does Vasikel on Shabbos morning. He does a question, a kiddush afterwards, a question and answer, and you see that his drink next to him, they cover it with a serviette. So he's very particular about my megulim. But for Netilas Yadayim, says the Mishnah Berurah, you don't have to worry. So you come to a sink and there's been water that's been left there, maybe even overnight. You don't have to worry. You can use that for Netilas Yadayim. Mayim psulim shenisar b'mayim kasherim. If you've got mayim psulim which is mixed up with mayim kasherim, b'telim b'miut, and they're bottled b'miut, u'meshalmen afil revius, and mashte, and they even count for revius in meinish danamarin, so long as the appearance has not changed, like we said previously. Okay, sif hey. Ein melacha peseles el b'mayim shu'uvim. When we said melacha, work done to the water, for example, it was, you washed up with it or whatever it was, that's only with mayim shu'uvim. Bein shem bekli, bein shem bekarka. Avol lo b'mei mikveh mayim ba'id mechubarim. But it doesn't puzzle when it comes to mayim mechubarim or mei mikveh, whilst they're still connected to their source. It says in the Shtabura, Chof Daled, shehem bekarka pirush, afilu hay b'shas melacha munachim bekarka, even if they were in the ground at the time, since they've got a status of mayim shuvin, that's what puzzles them. But when it's connected, then when you take away that water, that would be okay. But with regard to an animal puzzling it because they drank from the water, an animal drinking from it, like we said in the previous eve, those who puzzle would puzzle even if it's mechuba. That's only if you take the water out of the mikveh or the river, whatever it is. But if you want to use tevila and not netila, you want to actually dip your hands into the mikveh, then muta afbazeh. Or the Indian shnimare ayin le'el Mishnah Berurah sif cotton dalet. Okay, sivov chame ha'or. Now, water heated with fire. Are you allowed? This is an interesting question. How can the water be hot? When you wash Netilas Yadayim to have Shabbos lunch or during the week, whenever, does the water, can it be hot? So says the Mechaber, Chame ha'or, noit limehen Yadayim. You can use water which is heated by a fire for Netilas Yadayim. Afilu hein chamim shayad soledes. Even if it's so warm that it's yad soledes, which means that the hand, literally, that the hand is sort of retracts from it because it's so warm. So the famous definition is that the stomach of a child, where the skin is tender, will sort of retract from it, will be burned from it. So that's the degree of yad soledes. So it's very hot. You can't actually touch it. So imagine it's whatever it is. They're different machlikas and posting exactly how high. The chumrah we say I think 44 to 45 degrees or whatever it may be. But that's pretty hot. I mean, you would obviously, your hot bath would not be as hot as that, because you wouldn't be able to get into it. It's Netilas by means that you're going to be yad soledes, but it's too hot. Your hands are going to retract from it. So you can use warm water. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkot and Chafov, Shayad soledes shenim sheches me'achareh shelo tikove. Your hand retracts that it shouldn't get burnt. V'yesh me'achmirim b'yad soledes b'hem. There are those, however, who are machmir, that if the water is so hot that it's yad soledes by, that you should not use that for Netilas Yadayim. For kosa achrein to be'ein le'mayim acherim ein lahachmir b'zeh to ich kedas ha'shulchan aruch. That the ikka is like the Shulchan Aruch, who says that using even very hot water for Netilas Yadayim, that it's so hot that your hands would retract from it, that would be okay. However, others say it can be warm, but not boiling hot, that your hands move away from it. Of a faishrin, but if it's a paishrin, which means that it's warm, ein issa klal lekula alma, then everyone agrees that's fine. So here we have it. Even if it was boiling hot and it's now cooled down a little bit, gam kein muta, that would be okay. Acherim ki im chamen sheyad soledes bohem yire lahamdin ma'at ad sheyistanu b'mixas shelo yeh yad soledes bohem v'yeh mutzah lekula alma. So to let it cool down a little bit, and that way the kula alma will be okay. So just to summarize, the Mechaber says you're allowed to use hot water for Netilas Yadayim, even if it's so hot that it's yad soledes bohem, your hand retracts from it. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings achronim who say that you should avoid if it's yad soledes bohem. If it's warm, however, that would be no problem to use that. If it's a bit lower than yad soledes bohem. Okay, Zayin. Says the Mechaber, Chame Tveria. So you've got pools of water from Tveria, which are very hot. You can do Tvilas Yadayim into Chame Tveria. Of a little mehem bekli loy, but not that you take the water out of Chame Tveria and then do Netilas Yadayim. If, however, you sort of take it out of the Chame Tveria by putting some sort of tunnel on the ground, through a choretz, and it's moving away from it from there, and there's a gap between the ma'ayan hanovea that flows from it. If it's got a shir mikvah, then you can do tfilas yadayim. But otherwise not. If it's connected, the Rashi you cannot do tfilas yadayim, or the Rav Rabbeinu Yonah you can. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah on that. Lahad bil bohem b'chol ma'ayonos t'chamei tveria ma'ayon all ma'ayonos they've got a din of a ma'ayon like chamei tveria afilu ein bohem aboim so even if they haven't got 40 so v'chanal b'sim kufnu test if you done it of a little mehem you're allowed to do tfilas yadayim in it but not to take the water out v'afilu ma'ayon gadol sheyesh ba'aboim so even if it's cooled down. The problem is that with these ma'ayonos, that often the water are not drinkable, and therefore that's the problem. And therefore they're not even roy l'shtias kelev, and therefore you can't use them for netilas yadayim. You could use them for tfilas yadayim, but not netilas yadayim. Derech choretz, and if you sort of somehow divert the water out and through some sort of tunnel, shebekarka v'hu adinim holach derech tziner, if it goes through a pipe or something, im ein olov sham kli, v'hifsikon memayon da'oz bat memenu teres mayon, de'en rak mikvah. Then, if it's got a din of a mikvah, then no problem. You can do tfilas yadayim, matbinim bohem, dahash kol gufa tova bohem, yodov lekol shkein. If you can dip your whole body to become tahar, then certainly you can dip your hands for netilas yadayim, which is drabonim purposes. V'im ein bohem. But if there's no, but if it's not mechuba, we said, v'mein bohem shemik v'loi. Sorry, v'mein bohem shemik v'loi. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamedalet v'af lamachshirin le'el b'simen kufnun tes if you dalet v'pachas me'aboim so af mikva hacha b'chamei tveria moedu de gazrinan im novel ahat b'yadayim heicha da'af sekinu mima'amayon. If you allow you to use it when it's detached from the ma'ayan, yomru hamayim shel chamei tveria kashamayim v'yavo little mehem af b'kli. You might come to use the water from the chamei tveria in a kli for netilas yadayim, and then that's not allowed. Okay, and then we said at the end that the Rashba and Rashi both say if the choretz mezeh meimav mechubar and me'amayon anavei hasham, if it's connected to the mayon, they hold ein matbilin. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lametei the gam bozeh gozru shema yovel itol gam bekli kim daf sekinu mimkeim ve'im b'im altzman aboim so. But that's Rabbeinu Yonah kim the mechubares lemei hamayim v'kosh af tfilas kufay shuv leishach lemigzeh shema yovel itol af bekli. So again, just at the end, what's the machlokas? The machlokas is if the choretz you've diverted the water from the mei tveria, from the mei the chamei tveria, and there's a choretz of the water running away. Can you do tfilas yadayim in that? According to Rashi and Rashba, no. A gezer you might come to do netilas yadayim from the chamei tveria, but according to Rabbeinu Yonah, they would be okay because if you, at the end of the day, you can dip into it. It's still kosher as a mikvah, so certainly you can use it for netilas yadayim. Let's just do one more. Ches. Now, just because this is connected to what we just said, Tam Pisel Chamei Tveria Latina. What is the reason? Why is Chamei Tveria possible for Netilas Yadayim? Mipnei Shehim Morim, says the Mechaber, because the waters there are very bitter. Ve'enam Ru'iyim L'Shtias HaKelev, and they're not able for a dog to drink from it, like the Mishnah Berurah says. Avalim Yimtzu Mayim Chamin Noivim Sheim Ru'iyim L'Shtias HaKelev Noitlim Me'yadayim. But if the water coming from the Chamei Tveria or the similar Ma'ayan, then that would be, if it's royal shtias kelev, then that would be okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamed Vav Sheim Mipnei Shein Morim Ve'enam Ru'in Uchdelekame B'Siv Tes De'elu Machmas Chamus and Ein Nifsol. You're not passing them because of the heat of the water, because Chamei Tveria are very warm. That's not the problem. We said previously in Sivov that hot water is okay. The problem is that the water there is very bitter, not royal shtias kelev. Hakelev af shemashunim betama mishamayim she'enam ru'im kol kach l'shtias odom kivin shal kol ponim ru'im l'shtias hakelev kashem netila. But if the water was royal shtias kelev, even though it wasn't royal shtias odom, that would be okay. V'da Teladas yesh machmirin shekosav nelel Mishnah Berurah Sif Kolton Chav Zayin in Chamei Har kol shkein de yesh lahachmir kan in chamishot ma'ayonos shelo hoya lohen me'olam shas hakosher, because they were never cold, they were always hot, and therefore for those who are machmir on very hot water, if this ma'ayan water is so hot, that they would be machmir here as well. Okay, so the bottom line is you can use mayim megulim, water which has been exposed. That would be okay, and also hot water would be okay. Yatzeledas one should try and avoid, but b'diavad that would be okay.
Why not from the